Mile 18 Moments, embracing the suck of life and career to reach your finish line with your host, Craig Petras. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mile 18 Moments podcast, where we learn to embrace the suck of life and career to reach our finish lines. I'm your host, Craig Petras, founder and chief inspiration officer for Mile 18 Moments. I'm very excited to introduce our latest guest on Mile 18 Moments, Andrew Margolick, or Rumi, as I like to call him sometimes, as he and I were college roommates back in the day when we attended Barry University. We're also fellow student athletes where we played baseball. Drew or Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Our pre-show meeting, you talked a little bit about what you're doing now, and with student athletes and baseball players. I'm gonna turn the page of this podcast a little bit and really kind of focus in on what you're doing there, and how you help student athletes succeed. So drill deeper down into, what your day-to-day, kind of focus is on and working with these players. What are some of the main things that you're working with these athletes on?
There's the obvious, that is just their baseball skills, if you will. But mm-hmm. I would say that I spend more time working with them on the mental game and their own mentality of being a pitcher or being a position player, and what it takes to really be great, and not to let, I've always told everyone that I think if you have fear, you could be the most athletic person in the world. I've seen some absolutely phenomenal athletes look like they can't walk and chew gum because they're scared and they lock themselves up. So working through creating routines, working through being mentally strong, and just understanding again that, especially in the game of baseball, I'd say more than other games, there's no time machine. You're gonna fail, move on, succeed, move on. If you're a pitcher, you're gonna do that up to 100 times a game. And so having that ability, I would say, to just, again, have a short-term memory, quickly move on, regroup, refocus, and get the job done. That's if I can impart that on people, they're going to be more successful.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, there's so much pressure on some of these athletes and these baseball players or whatever you do, to be competitive. For those individuals who want to play at the elite level, a lot of pressure, a lot of work to get there, because that 1% of every, baseball player out there actually hits, professional baseball or makes the major leagues, et cetera. So there's just a lot of pressure to begin with. Right. And so we could see how, the mental side of athletes and baseball players certainly gets in the way. Especially during the past 5 years of what we've gone through this thing called mental health is really kind of risen to the surface with everybody, regardless if you're an athlete or not. And so, mental health and mental side of anything is certainly prevalent in this day and age. When you work with these baseball players, what do you see as the biggest roadblock for them mentally that kind of holds them back from being a good to great player to being an elite player? If we can, kind of dive into a few of those really deep, I'd love to kind of get your idea or your opinions of what are the mental roadblocks and then how you take them through them.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, as I mentioned, is whether you want to call it fear or, I think fear is probably the best word, but fear locking themselves up. I like it, kind of cheesy, but I like a lot of these motivational videos and motivational talks. And there's a gentleman named, I think his name's Jordan Peterson, and he talked about how you should be a monster, you should be an animal, and then you should tone it back. And I spend a lot of time getting people to be absolutely as aggressive as they can be, and then scaling it back. And if you make aggressive mistakes, that's fine. I think that, that's really true anywhere. But if you're passive and being passive hurts you, that's a problem in sports. That's a problem in a lot of places. So I think dealing with that, I think there's so many distractions for kids today and for people in general. So it's those distractions, I think, hurt people from understanding how to manage their time. They have so many things they want to do. And a lot of people don't write things down. I spend a lot of time with every kid walking through their schedule when they tell me, I don't have time to get in the weight room. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. And you come to find out that, they're playing their Xbox, they're on their phone, they wake up and they don't get up for an hour. So you go through a schedule and all of a sudden you're creating 4 hours in a day where they have the ability to do something. So I think, the people, and I think it really is a mindset of scheduling yourself and sticking to a schedule. It can be that you think you're too busy, and it can be that you've got plenty of time and you say, I'm going to do this later, and it never gets done because later just happens to come too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we've got that. And I think I think the last thing, again, in terms of a mindset, is I want people to set goals, and I want people to try to hit those goals, and they should be measurable goals. I see too many people who are saying, I'm going to go to the gym today, but they have no plan of what they're going to do when they get there. I see guys that, again, they come into a baseball facility and they're like, all right, I'm going to hit today. Well, what specifically are you working on with your hitting? I'm going to throw. Okay, how many throws are you taking? What specifically are you doing? And if they can get into that sort of mindset of, I'm in here to get my work done, I've got a good plan laid out, and I'm going to do it, they're going to succeed more times than not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. And I'm going to go back to something you said really at the beginning, in this concept of fear, right? We are all fearful of things in our life, but curious, when you work with these baseball players, what are they afraid of? Is it, I won't answer the question for you, but, I have some thoughts on that, but what do you find they're afraid of? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think they are afraid of, some of them are afraid of succeeding, and then, as crazy as it sounds, sort of creating expectations for themselves, or having others create expectations for them. But a lot of people are just afraid to fail, and they think if they fail at one specific thing, they are a failure, rather than literally just saying, okay, whatever, moving on, I'm going to get it done now. And having that attitude of, again, just being able to move on. The other thing that they are afraid of is, I think, back to just these distractions that are out there. I can say specifically to the game of baseball, but I think it's everywhere, is there's so much information out there that if you're just, again, sticking with the baseball example, if you're playing against, if someone I work with is pitching against a certain team, they can look that team up. They can look every player up. They can look at their background. If it's a high school team, they may look at where kids are committed to and everything like that. And all of a sudden they predetermine these outcomes. And that drives me crazy. I work with so many kids on saying that's great. You're facing a really tough team. What a great challenge. And I ask each kid, I would say in the first 1 or 2 sessions, I ask each kid, okay, if I told you could go pitch against the Yankees tomorrow, what's your immediate thought? Don't think about it. Just tell me what comes to your mind. And a lot of them say, oh, well, they've got this guy, this guy, this guy. And then sometimes the kids say to me, well, what would your immediate thought be? And I'd say mine was, let's go. Who cares? Like, let's see how I stack up. Let's dive into it. And if I fail, I fail, but I'm going to go out there and try. And instead, kids, again, they have too much information out there that will also give them fear, because they may not think they're as good as someone.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And failure, I like this quote that I've published before, and it's embrace the fear of the moment so you can build confidence for the future. And I think that's it, right? If these athletes or these students or people in general, if you embrace the fear of the moment and you get through it, whether or not you're successful or not, you got through it, but it's going to build your confidence in the future. So, we certainly always want to, this Mile 18 moment, you always want to connect this fear towards confidence, because it's going to build that, it's going to build that for you. And I always I always like to use a quote with the students that I, career coach all the time, is get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And because if you can do that, every single time you're put in a challenging position, it's going to feel easier. It's going to look easier, and you'll have a ton more confidence to get through that. And I think that, to your point, with these young baseball players, or these baseball players, or even the students that I career coach, is there's a ton of noise out there, right? Don't just be you, and just go, and don't feel failure, because everything worth accomplishing is on the other side of failure, right? And so it's really important. And
Yeah.
so,
Look, that's
go ahead.
I think what you said is really important there, which to me is, I tell kids to become the best version of themselves that they can. They look at so many other people, so many other players, and everyone's ceiling is different. And I just want them to try to reach that ceiling. I've got kids who, putting aside the kid in professional baseball I've talked about, I've got kids who throw, 90 miles an hour, 91 miles an hour. I've got kids who throw 60 miles an hour. And it's all about getting them to be the best version of themselves that they can be, versus trying to be someone else. And if you do that, then I like the idea of competing with yourself to see how good you can be. You start looking at other people, and you can look at other people and learn what they're doing to make yourself better, but don't try to become them.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this world of comparison, I think that's one of the biggest things that when we think about wanting to become successful, that's that barrier to entry for being successful, is we compare ourselves to others. And that's, once you start doing that, you're dead on arrival, I think.
Yes.
And it's, comparison will certainly knock you on your knees if you have that mentality, is because the only one, and I think you said this earlier, the only thing or person or a thing that you can control is you, right? You can't control sometimes the noise around you and what we do on a regular basis. The only person you can control is you, and the only actions we can't fix are the ones we don't take. Right. And so, that's that mentality of what you just said, is just go. If I'm pitching against the Yankees tomorrow, what are you thinking? I'm just going to go, and you have to make that happen. With distractions, let's focus in on planning a little bit. Right. Let me step back. Sorry. We talked about fear. We talked about distractions. We talked about, planning and setting goals. Interesting, right? Like, you are laying out a bit of a recipe for success on the field, and these baseball players may want to be successful, but when you lay out that recipe, and be like, hey, if you want to be elite, this is what you need to do. How do they take that, right? Because, and I guess what I mean there is like, some people will embrace that and be self-aware enough to know, yes, I need to embrace all of this advice and this coaching if I'm going to be elite. Or, you know what, that was a lot more work that I thought it was going to be. I'm out. Right. And so what are you seeing, or with athletes and baseball players these days? Are they embracing the fact that I'm going to work hard and do everything that this advice tells me to do to be successful? What are your thoughts there? Mm-hmm.
Some are. I would say most are. And frankly, the ones that aren't are the ones where I have a conversation either with them or, depending on the age, with the parents, and say, you're wasting your money. Like, this is not free labor out of me. They're paying me a lot of money, and I appreciate it, but I'm not going to just take someone's money and tell them they're doing a great job if they're not. And so when I have those conversations and the kids don't buy in, perfect example is I'll work with kids, maybe at the most, I would say I work with an individual kid once a week, and they go home and they have work that they need to do. And again, I'm helping them to manage their time and helping them to get their workouts very specific and their goals very specific. And if they come back the next week and they haven't done anything, I'm going to see that. And they're wasting their parents' money, or they're wasting their own money. And I'm not here for their handout. I'd rather work with kids who want to be elite and want to be good. And I'll tell them that. And some kids have done a 180 and been great, and some kids have left, and that's just fine. But there's nothing wrong with me to wanting to play rec league baseball or go have fun with your friends. No issue there whatsoever. But if you want to be really good, then you have to understand what it takes to get there.
Yeah. Of those individuals that you've worked with, those baseball players that you have seen come and go, what are two or three things that have been consistent with those baseball players that made it to where they needed to go, whether it be D1, D2 baseball, or even the pros? What are the characteristics? What are the attributes of those that made it through? And what defined them? What pushed them to get it through?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is they have that compete factor. They really understand how to compete. And I am the furthest thing from a triathlete, but I would assume this holds true for you too, is you're not going to have a good day every day. You're not going to have your good stuff, or you're not going to feel great every day, but you can go out there and compete your butt off. And these guys go out there and do that. They really understand how to compete. They understand how to have routines that you can fall back on for comfort. So I was this way, I would say, where 24 hours before a start for me, I could tell you what I would do to the minute, and I would not deviate from that in terms of even how I got dressed, how I stretched. And the best guys, I think, have those routines where they're disciplined. So they compete, they're disciplined in what they're doing, and they set those goals and it's not a goal that's out there like, I want to go play Division I baseball, because again, you can't control whether a coach is going to offer you or not. So they set these goals that are measurable, and they really work toward them. They really check themselves, and those are the guys who make it. The ones who, again, just go in and check a box saying, well, I worked out 5 days this week, but they couldn't tell you what they did. Those are the guys who fail. And then the ones who lie to themselves, ultimately, I think, have that regret, and they don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Good point. And with those attributes and characteristics of both what you've seen not work, or what are some of those roadblocks with baseball players, and what you've seen for them to be successful, how do you equate some of those characteristics, both negative and positive, to us who are not baseball players anymore, who are school teachers, who are parents, who are in commercial real estate, right? How do you equate some of these characteristics to being successful in business?
I think that the discipline carries over. I think the competition is a tough one. I struggled very early in my real estate career because, as you know, I think when we played together, I was a guy who wanted to destroy the opponent. I didn't want to just go out there and do pretty well. I wanted to just absolutely demolish them. And you can't really negotiate like that in the real world. So putting the competitiveness aside, I think having discipline, really understanding what tasks you have for the day, what you need to get done, and getting them done and scheduling them is important. And I think dummying things down is, as silly as it sounds, dumbing things down and just saying, okay, this is what I need to do, or this is what I'm trying to do. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I'll reflect back on it and see what I could have done differently. But eliminating the noise, and just, you're in baseball, you're throwing a ball and someone's trying to hit a ball. In my line of work, I'm negotiating a deal, and either someone's going to take it or they're not going to take it. And I think if people can take that attitude into the workplace, they're going to be a lot more productive too.
Yeah, perfect. Good. And, as we wind down here, Drew, for this latest podcast, and of course, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing us, with your own Mile 18 moments, as well as how you are helping baseball players get through their own Mile 18 moments. I appreciate your journey, and we all have our own seasons and our own journeys to get through, and it's very relatable in terms of the struggles we all go through. But what is some final advice that you can give to our listeners about how they can overcome their own mile 18 moment, embrace that suck, and so that they can reach their finish line, right? Or what are those things that you and I may not have talked about today that you want to impart on our listeners?
I think it's stuff we talked about, but just to reiterate it, I think it's when people are faced with as you call it, a mile 18 moment, if they really reflect back on it once it's over, how much of it, again, could they control, and how much of it did they make worse by worrying about something they couldn't control? So, that's absolutely a big one. And then I think it's the preparation that leads to that mile 18 moment where, again, if I'm going back to baseball terms, it's something where if you practice in pressure situations, if you are very good about really challenging yourself, and coaches are good about challenging players, the game takes care of itself. The race takes care of itself. The pitch you make at work takes care of itself. And the negotiation you may have when you have a client takes care of itself because you're ready for it. And again, that's where, at least for me, I have this attitude of, okay, I'm ready for this, and it's going to either happen or not happen. And I'm not going to worry about whether I was prepared because I know I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point, right? Because, preparation is the key. If you feel extremely confident going into the triathlon or the baseball game, or, the meeting to get a promotion or the big client meeting, et cetera, if you're prepared, the confidence is going to follow. But even, every pitch is not the same. Every inning is not the same. Every race course is not the same. It could be, 75 degrees and sunny the day before a race or a baseball game. And then now you're pitching in rain or you're swimming through 2 or 3 foot waves. Right. And so, you have to embrace it. You have to get through it. And because everything is not going to be, a perfect race course as we call it. This has been awesome, Drew, and thank you again for spending some time with us and imparting your insights into success with our Mile 18 community. I certainly appreciate that. But Drew, thanks again for your time today. And if we have any listeners out there with baseball players that want to connect with Drew to talk about the mental side of the game, definitely reach out to me, and I'll certainly put you in touch. But Drew, thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Great being here. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right. That's it for today.